course with them. They had one event so far. I wasn't really interested in that event.
Yeah.
And was Safe You. I think it's a startup here. Women rights and whatnot. It's not women's rights, it's domestic violence prevention. I didn't go to that event. Grant writing seminar. That might be helpful. Actually, I was helping a startup apply for a grant, so it was very timely.
So, czy inaczej będzie kan idee
Bonjour.
So he will do this setup. Lots of meters, lots of like
fun hangouts, mixers,
Leather chairs.
So you have to email list because just
Armen. All right, focus.
okay, I don't know how to work on it. So
Okay. She will introduce her project.
It's my pleasure to
Marek
see
more
all of
video
you here. Thank you for coming. Today we are having our next public talk as a part of STRIPS project, which is Horizon Europe funded project about research capacity development in Armenia in the sphere of energy transition and energy transition. And it's my pleasure to welcome Dr. Monica Pinhanez, and today's topic is carbon markets and local communities, experiments from Brazil. Thank you, Monica. And yeah, at the end we will have part for a Q&A session.
Hi everybody, buenos dias. Unfortunately, there are very few words that I can speak in Armenian, and I'm very thankful to Alan and to the STRIP project for inviting, let me present my project, inviting me, and I hope it will be, I will be to everybody's content. Alan, do you have time? What is the maximum time? Someone said 2 hours, someone said...
No. We have an hour
3 hours.
scheduled for this. So.
Okay, 1 hour, 3 hours, okay.
Until 12
No.
midnight we're open.
Okay. No, I cut a lot of stuff, but I planned more or less half an hour of talk, but you can interrupt me at any time. And this project that I'm presenting today to you, and I'm sorry that this doesn't get here, right? But I will try to, no, it does. But I mean, the pointer does not.
Oh yeah, not on the screen.
Not on the screen, but there it's okay. So basically, what I'm going to present to you is a project, actually, and a pilot experiment that we had done in Brazil, that is based, and all the research that went behind it to get at this, the point that we are now, that basically looks at how we can instrumentalize, to give people that are local communities that are not usually, they do not have access to financial markets, an access and a way to incorporate and to engage in them and to have the opportunity to use these new instruments, these new financial tools, right? So, and just because the element, the tools are there, the things that who can use it, right? So then, oops.
So you might be able to.
Yes. Okay, that's okay. And not only to do it in a way that we put together environmental and social inclusion, but also financial mechanisms that enable local communities, local peoples to take advantage of these instruments and take advantage of the market, because otherwise we talk about the market, but they are excluded of the market, right? the formal market. They are usually informal, they don't have access to formal banks, formal systems, and so on. So the idea is like, how can we empower and at the same time make feasible for them to use these tools? There are these technologies, financial technologies, social technologies that are usually available to us here, but do not reach out the people on the bottom, right? So the idea, what's this talk not about? I could talk a lot about a lot of financial mechanisms, right? I could talk about RED, I could talk about digital markets, I could about even carbon markets in Brazil and the new legislation. The idea is not to talk about all of this. The idea is to bring to you some evidence from the work that I have done and some experiments that have happened in Brazil, so that it can illustrate, not only in Brazil, because we have done our research in many places in the world, but it will show how we can integrate these policies, and we can maybe think of a new model, if not a new model, at least a model that will fit and will bring together the groups, communities, peoples, and also make a better use of such instruments. I'm not talking about theoretical aspects of financial markets, of carbon markets. I'm not talking about a solution, a total solution for the whole problem, the problems that we have. And we are not trying to criticize the tools. The tools are here, and could be, say, neutral, right? We have to appropriate them. And that's the idea, how to appropriate all these tools that are available to us. And we also, yes, please.
Just a quick question, is the deck going to be distributed to the attendees? I'm
If
just
you
wondering
want,
how much,
yes.
How much notes I should take?
No, that's okay. And actually, the whole presentation is much larger than the one that I'm presenting today. So there are things on the RED carbon markets in Brazil, on the social bank, social credit. So I put there, but you can look at it. Okay, so. Okay, but first of all, I know that you are knowledgeable about the world economy in Brazil, but let me tell you a few things about Brazil. We used to say in Brazil that Brazil are not for beginners. You know, it's a very complex country. It's huge, right? And there's a lot of things going on. There's a lot of industries developing. So, for example, we have the aeronautic industry, space, building airplanes, and at the same time, we have people that live that are waste pickers, right? Living out of waste. 60% of the economy is informal, but then we have one of the largest oil companies, Petrobras. We have and a huge resource, natural resources in both minerals and oil and other things, and then we have also research that has been done, and somehow it's equated to very good world research. For example, some of the universities in Brazil are on the top 100 or 200 universities in the world in terms of research, right? But if you have it all, why haven't we found the solution for poverty, for inequality, for disease, for whatever it is that affect and afflict the people, right? And you have some in the list of the 20 most wealthy people in the world. We still have some Brazilians. Okay, so just to give you then this is the map, right? Brazil is there, and is it working?
It's about the size of North America.
Yes, it's
And
the.
America,
But I should, okay, here. So this is with the fifth country. Actually, it's almost the size of North U.S., except that when you add some of the other parts, the non-continuous land, Brazil is smaller, right? And here, can you guess what is this here?
Which one?
Amazon.
Huh? Okay, here is the Amazon, and what is this here? This point here.
São
What?
Paulo.
Huh?
São Paulo.
Yes, São Paulo, this is the state of São Paulo, and this part here. Do you know by any
The
chance?
Atlantic forest.
Don't tell us this is a dump site.
No, I think you will recognize it.
KFC.
Armenia.
It's Armenia.
Oh, I see.
So just to tell you, it's
Oh,
not.
Armenia is very big.
It's not to, I'm not here to compare and humiliate Armenia. Say, oh, you're so. No, it's the
Come
opposite.
on, let's leave.
Actually, it's size matters. No, we
Very
have
proud of our size.
literature and have discussed it. The size, and it does matter because, for example, I'm going to talk to you about something that's here. Right? I'm not going to talk about the Amazon forest that everybody wants to hear about. I'm not going to talk about all this area and the things that happens all over Brazil. But I have the knowledge of this small area here. There's probably some, how to say it? What's the name of this area in Armenia?
Unique?
Sunit. Yes, they're even smaller than Sunit area. Right? And then you could, maybe there is a way to compare is if you look at that. Maybe there is not.
Governance scales are very different.
Yes, very, very, yeah, and this is something that really matters when you look at it, right? And then here's the Amazon. The Amazon forest, as you can see, is much larger than the Amazon state, right? When you talk about the Amazon, there is the Amazon region. It kind of gets other countries and goes to the center of Brazil, and this is the part that has been deforested. And São Paulo is here, and the Atlantic forest, that is one of the important aspects that is going to be in our project, is here, was here, right? It covered all the coastal area, and now it's less, only 12%. Only 12% survived human action. So this is the state São Paulo. São Paulo is here. São Paulo City is here. And just to give you a visual account, and this is São Paulo City. You can see, I like to say that it's a dog's face, right? You have 2 ears, the little nose, and the neck, one of those.
A funny dog.
A funny dog, yes. And we will be looking into this area here. That is basically 1/3 of the São Paulo city, and has where all of the things that I'm going to tell you take place. As you can see, São Paulo has a lot of inequalities. The area that we are talking about is an area with the highest HDI, just to make you accountable to what we are talking about. Still, there are a lot of inequalities locally. So the same time that you find, well, this is very wealthy and very rich, no problems, or only there are problems. No, here inside you have actual disparities that are really huge. And so here is some examples of São Paulo, of Brazil. Do you know, I guess some of you know, which is pictures, where Iguaçu Falls, what else?
Rio.
Sugarloaf.
Yeah, Sugarloaf. And among these favelas, yes, among these pictures, there are pictures from São Paulo. Which ones do you think are São Paulo?
The middle ones.
This one here? This?
Middle one.
This?
Without nature.
Without
That's
this?
Avenida Paulista, no?
Okay, this is not Avenida Paulista, but it's very close. It's like Berrini is one of the financial centers of São Paulo. Here you can see the sea of buildings. This is one of the wealthiest areas of São Paulo, and here is actually 2 pictures, one top down and one bottom up, showing the same building that is a building that is very upscale, right? And next door is this quarter. So you can see from top down or bottom up, and it's not a collage, and it's very interesting. But surprise, let me show you what is São Paulo. Oops. This is São Paulo City. All of these are actually in São Paulo City. You have this and you have this. Today, right? These pictures are from 10 years or a little bit more. You have the informal markets. They are rampant and they are everywhere. You have forest, the Atlantic forest. You have indigenous peoples, and you have indigenous territories. And it's in this situation, this kind of a context that we are going to look at our projects. Like, well, So what does it mean for us to interact or intervene or even suggest something that kind of makes it more equal, less disparate, with less disparity, so that we people have a better life and can actually take advantage of some tools, be them social tools or financial tools that are available to us. So we have these. This is our, and so the group that I'm talking about, we will talk about in my project, is an indigenous group, right? That lives in that area that I took the pictures that I showed to you, is this area here. But this is the whole picture of how many indigenous groups are in Brazil and the areas, land that has already been declared their land. Okay, so there's a lot of diversity. There is a lot of environmental wealth. You can imagine, because not only the Atlantic forest, but the Amazon also was huge. And there is a lot of pressure because, for example, here in this area, the coastal area where you see a lot of occupation is the area, or a lot of tribes or territories, right? Is also the area where you have the highest concentration of urban population. So, for example, in São Paulo state, you have something like 34 million people in this state. In São Paulo region and metropolitan area that is here, you have 22 million people. And in São Paulo city, you have 12 million people, right? So we have to deal with all of this and say, well, how can you take advantage and put all of this together and in this context work something? So, and we looked at these areas and said, well, we have problems with indigenous rights, both in terms of land claims and traditional governance systems, like how they govern, how they deal with the land, and how they, well, and how we deal, and what are the laws and the regulations that are applying to them. How do we include them and make them part of the society? There's a lot of discrimination against indigenous people. People say that they don't work, they are lazy, they are sick, they drink a lot. And then we also have problems like urban expansion and watershed protection. Because actually that area that I'm going to be more specific and show to you more in depth, it's actually is the house for 2 reservoirs that provide water for the whole population of São Paulo. And it's also part of the Atlantic forest and has a lot of other things that I'm going to show you that go over, that overlap each other. So, but basically the scheme that here is like urban expansion, to some extent affects watershed preservation areas like forests and groups that live here. There's a lot of conflict, and conflicts are for land invasions, like people who are illegal settlers that go there and try to occupy the indigenous land, or other smaller farmers. And we have to think of the indigenous communities and then what methodology we use, right? So part of the methodology was like I don't know if you are used to, it's like participatory action research. So we went there, talked to the community, worked with them, trying to model something that find out what are the problems, what they think are the problems, and how we could solve together or not, right, these problems, and then propose a theory of change. Theory of change is, I'm not going to go into the theory of change, it's in the slides if you want to know more. But basically, it's about how do you promote real change in the world, right? So is it enough just to go there and analyze or have a diagnosis, or what else do we need to do? And we finally use the financial tools. Well, that was one of the findings of our project. So, just to give you a very, very quick legal framework, Brazil has been very important in terms of these new markets and environmental issues, but it's quite recent too, right? It is from the last century on, but in terms of carbon market, is from the 2000s. Then in 2009, we have the National Climate Change Policy, another policy in 2017, and in 2022 we have the new project, Regulation for emissions reduction mark that regulates how firms can what firms can do to transaction like with credits, social credits or carbon credits, and indigenous communities. And then this project was approved in 2024, November last year. Okay, but it has just regulates. It's still that we need to do a lot. It's just like the formal framework. Okay, after that you need a lot of process, other laws that regulate or say how it's going to happen. So basically this is the list of the laws that we have had since '97, and the very important landmark in terms of history was the Rio '92, but before that we had like some other important dates, but they were very fast, like the 60s and then the 70s, and then finally the ones that are international ones. So now going to the territory, right? So this is the territory. Here is the area that I'm looking at. The territories are here, they're marked here. And this is how you look from if you are coming from the southern part. Of course, if you are coming from the northern part, you have the whole urban occupation expansion here. It's an area of 153 kilometers square, and has a population of 200,000 people more or less. It's a little bit more now. Here are the two areas, like the dams, right? These are compound, the Guarapiranga and Billings. There are the two reservoirs. They are very much occupied by overpopulation. You can see some of the demarcations. In some ones you have a higher density law, some ones you have a lower density. You have also a very consolidated urban population, very close or at the border of the water, right at the edge of the water, and there is almost no sewage treatment in this area. Actually, there is some of the rivers that feed these tributaries for the dam, the reservoirs. They run for 40 kilometers, receiving the sewage of all the cities on the way, and they end up here. And we have all the typical problems, like, for example, the growth of algae. We have contamination. We have all types of environmental problems, like the change in the biodiversity of that water. So you have a lot, living beings there. So you have a lot of problems. It's very much, you can have a very impressive view like this.
What's the conditions of the local, of health of the local population?
Of what the
For
conditions?
health, people's health living around.
You know, it's still, São Paulo is the most developed state in Brazil, right?
Really?
So, yes.
Most
Developed.
Most developed.
Yeah, most developed. So they have access to a lot, to the universal health system that we have available. So it's better. It doesn't mean that the mortality rate in some of these, and mortality rate for kids, right, it's lower here, but it's still not bad compared to other areas of the country, right? But in some areas you have problems like pulmonary diseases because of the conditions of the mold and all those things, because it's a very humid area, and but otherwise it's okay. It's not as bad as you could think, but in terms of, it's an urban area, right? And there has been a lot of projects in some of these areas to not just for the environment, but also for health situations. So it is getting better, but it's much less, much more precarious than the downtown area. And I have some maps here. I don't know by heart exactly the data on mortality and other things, but I could find later if you are interested in.
I was just curious, people living right next to untreated sewage, their health conditions shouldn't be great.
Yeah, that's a very interesting thing because, for example, I've been working in quarter in slums that are very encroached in the urban area, and there it's really bad because the garbage has nowhere to go, right? So it's basically you see it floating, you can collect it, but here many times you cannot see as much. So in many areas here you can do surf. Yes, I do a lot of stand-up paddle there, not close to the more populated areas because it's really bad, but sometimes you cannot see and there has been a lot of projects for reurbanization and innovation of the area so that it kind of starts treating the sewage and so on, right? But yeah, absolutely. For example, some areas I would never enter, right? But it is a problem. So, and this is the area, the peoples that I'm looking at. They are all Guarani Biringuiá, but they have different groups and territories. Now they are 14 to 70, and oops, I think I'm taking longer than I should. And here I'm going to give you just
Carbon markets, carbon markets.
Assim como o grande, como sul de seu território está localizado, lugar não tão distante do centro da área de proteção ambiental.
I planned for this to be faster, but so. And this is supposed to be in English, but it's not.
What part of it do you want us to see?
I want you to see some of the groups that live here. So it's just so it's all this area.
Lugar não tão distante do centro urbano,
Sorry?
mas com áreas de cidades do interior, em forma de ecoturismo de e oferece atrações para todos os gostos. Em locais
Because I did before, and then I was.
há espaços para uma tranquila
Men jobbar
E é aqui que começa o nosso primeiro dia de passeio, na Central de Informação Turística. É aqui que você tira todas as suas dúvidas sobre o seu passeio. E um jeito diferente de conhecer boa parte da região é embarcar no passeio das jardineiras. E melhor coisa é a gente encontrar um guia, né? Vai encontrar o Lucas agora, que vai falar de todas as dicas que você pode aproveitar melhor ainda no nosso dia de férias. Eu, Lucas, estou super animada no nosso passeio. Para a gente começar, conta um pouquinho da história que a gente vai superar aqui.
Com certeza. Nosso trabalho foi consolidado com a criação do Centro de Turismo de São Paulo, parelho com a história do Borelé em 2016. Mas começou bem antes, lá em 2001, quando foi criada a primeira área de proteção ambiental no município, a Capivari Mono. E logo depois a Borelé colocou.
Okay. So this is the area that I'm talking about. That's where we are doing this work.
Isso tem um grande potencial para preservar essa área e trabalhar com o turismo, além também do território indígena.
É gigante a área.
Muito grande, muito grande da cidade.
And these are your cities?
These are the place where we work.
Melhor é ajudar para que você consiga bem assim.
Uma das muitas experiências do polo é a plantação, onde você pode ter contato direto com a terra, além de plantar e colher. O polo de ecoturismo é rodeado pelo cinturão verde da Mata Atlântica, incluindo mananciais e as represas Pires e Guarapiranga. Por isso, aqui existe um cuidado maior na produção rural. Muitos dos produtores locais tiveram que se adequar a um sistema de cultivo de alimentos sem agrotóxicos ou qualquer outro tipo de produtos químicos que possam impactar no meio ambiente. E é aqui onde todos os produtos orgânicos são cultivados, com todo amor e carinho. E justo, a gente tem aquela pausa.
Okay, just to show you this area.
Fazer a grana circular dentro do território. E a nossa última parada
And this is
é um lugar
the
surpreendente.
indigenous group
A terra indígena
that I
Pinhanez
mentioned.
é a maior da região sudeste, com 15.969 hectares de extensão. Nela vivem cerca de 2.000 indígenas do povo guarani. A visitação é permitida, porém, mediante agendamento. São oferecidas diversas atividades que possibilitam conhecer e vivenciar a cultura indígena. E o Thiago vai falar um pouquinho pra gente o que a gente pode esperar dessa visita.
Então, aqui a gente está
Are the indigenous areas protected like in the US?
existe
No.
cerca de
These
11
ones
milhas,
particularly,
tá, onde
other
cada
areas
comunidade
close to the Amazon or the
oferece essa atração turística, né? Cada área tem
just to give you a taste what I'm talking about. No, actually, these areas are not. They are supposed to be, but that's the part of the problem. They are not like protected in terms of a fence. Actually, there is a gate, but there is a gate, the gate, and there's nothing else, right? So no, there's no fence. And here in São Paulo, it's very vulnerable. That's part of the problem because it's so close to the urban area. You know, it's very easy to enter and to enter from other sides. The Guarapira and Billings Reservoir, they are huge. They get like 5 municipalities. And so you can go in from different places, and actually it threatens a lot their space. In areas, for example, such as the Amazon, the top northern Amazon, you cannot enter without permission, right? They are not fenced, but you cannot enter. So it's a different situation. But there are a lot of urban people or indigenous peoples in urban areas. In São Paulo, there are other areas that they have to deal with the expansion, with the problems, with the invasions, all the problems that are usually urban problems in Brazil. So, and that's the thing, right? Because they still have low income, they have problems, they have one of the highest vulnerabilities in the city, they suffer discrimination, they have to deal with the subsistence agriculture, but they are very disorganized. They do not have channels of marketing and marketing their products, and it seems that they have, right? The pictures there, they show the ecotourism hub, but actually it's much less than we see there, and then we have very poor conditions for women. So the thing is that, well, how do we help or how do we involve this population, and what can we do given that the land is already recognized as that. They are in a setting that is urban and very developed. They are in the middle of the forest, right? They name themselves the guardians of the forest, and still they have all these problems. And where do these problems comes from? So part of the problem comes from a lot of overlapping, jurisdiction overlap, right? Something like, for example, we did like a study of overlapping all the areas. So you have, let me show you. You have all the maps, and you have areas. There are some of the maps. Oops. You have some of the areas overlap. There are the lands, some of the sewage, and where they are. You see that despite being all this area here, most of these counts is only here. Okay, so you have a lot of problems in a lot of overlap, and for each one of the problems is a different jurisdiction. So, for example, for using land use zoning, it is one municipal sector who deals with it. For environmental infractions or crimes, it's the federal government. For the indigenous people, it's the federal government. For the Mata Atlântica, it's part of the state and part of the federal government. And then you have urban and rural, that is municipal law. So you have a vast system that should protect them and give them some conditions to manage, but actually it's much worse, right? So what we see is all these overlaps, and here we have the hydrographics, all the areas overlapping, and they have mining there, that is also federal jurisdiction. So it's always overlapping, and what ends up being is this tangle of laws and jurisdictions that no one knows how to decide, right? You have the municipal area, the environmental protection area that is local, you have the other one that is federal, so you start having this huge tangle that you cannot decide. And you have other people saying, you have like the dwellers around that they also decide, or they also want to say something about this. you have universities, you have NGOs, you have states, that São Paulo state and the other cities, the other municipalities around. You have the judiciary, so that's regulating, and you have banks, you have other structures around this, and then you end up being like the dog that has no owner or has too many owners, right? And dies of hunger because no one takes care of them. And so that's more, so to solve part of this problem and solve all of what we see and even their condition of poverty, we did a study of them and a project thinking of like, what could you do for them? What is their asset? What is their wealth? And basically what they have is the forest, right? That you see their houses are made of mud, it's very precarious, it's even today, right? Some now are better, and they have, just you asked about their health. For example, for the indigenous people, they have municipal health units, basic units inside the land. Okay, but the people who live around don't. So it's kind of, it becomes even another problem because they have to fight for that. They have schools inside the indigenous land and there are no schools outside. So it becomes, and they have a lot of rules, they are not safe. So basically what we did, we started to do a benchmark, right? And we did the benchmark with them. We met with the indigenous leaders. We chose one or two to deal with, to do the project and to talk about what was the problem. And there are the oldest problems. And we saw, what are the options? So you have many examples. For example, here, to start with, what we call the financial tools, right? The Grameen Bank is one example that has been around for 50 years. It's a social credit instrument. Have you heard of the Grameen Bank? Grameen Bank is a bank that was created in Bangladesh in the end of 70s and 80s. And he was created basically to give money to people who didn't have anything, that were being taken by sharks, money sharks. They would get loans and would never how to repay. And Muhammad Yunus, he was the Nobel Prize winner for like 4 years ago, I think. He asked for crediting banks to give to the people, and he didn't get. So he got from his own money, and I think it was $27. With $27, he started a project with a group of women, right? And he would give them, it was a very small amount, right? And they had to repay a certain point. There was like a group, so there was peer pressure and peer motivation.
The group had to guarantee that any individual taking money, the group would guarantee. If that person didn't pay back, the group would have to come up.
Yeah, but it was, anyway, so then, and then it worked very well, right? In Brazil, we have some of this experience, and not only worked, became a huge bank. Today, Grameen Bank is a regular bank, regulated by the central banks, and then they have a lot of projects. And so that's one thing that it looks like, well, how can we use some of this experience and to create a local, or dynamize, make more dynamic the local economy of these people? And actually in Brazil there are several experiences of that. One of the most known ones, but Palmas, there's in Ceará as well, and it's a community that does all the trade with their local money. Oh, is it possible? Yes. They actually now, even the municipality adopted it, and so does some exchange and vouchers in exchange for the Palma, right? The Palma money, and they do. So we looked at this, we looked at Banco Palma, and then we looked at some experience with carbon. It's like, well, what do they have? Their wealth is big, their asset is the forest. So why are you not using the carbon market for them? Because usually carbon markets are not accessible to smaller owners, land owners or smaller territories, right? It's usually, first of all, it's a very expensive process to get the accreditation of the credit, right? It was not regulated in Brazil until last year, so there was not even where to go except for the voluntary market. But the voluntary market is not also work with small people, right? Like people that know resources, but they had an experience in 2002. There was a waste dump in a central area in São Paulo. Central considered the whole area, but not very central, right? That they transformed the whole dump into gardens and parks, and changed it and did it with carbon credits, right? They transformed, they converted into carbon credits and use it to pay the service, the infrastructure that was to put in place, and with that they mobilized the whole population, because there was population at the top of it.
This was a clean development mechanism?
Yes. And then, it was very interesting, because after it was done, it has never been talked. It is even hard to find documentation on the internet. The only documentation I found when I was looking at that was 1 or 2 pages by the municipal government, and it didn't say much about it. It was was very accessible. They finished it. It's not a dump anymore. There are parks and there are people living in the area. Yes.
Was it done by the local government, or it's done by a private developer?
No, it was done in conjunction with the local government, the community there, because you had to negotiate, because some people had to live, right? So you had also to deal with the people who were occupying that area. Usually they are poorer people that actually sometimes work in the dump, and some private companies to do the project. Yes.
And who bought the carbon credits?
Well, it was the municipal level. They transformed it, they did it, and they sold to the companies, and they made a trade. It was not like buying, like now we have a market, because at that time, 20 years ago, we didn't have the market per se, right? So basically, they were transforming and doing it in a more it's not informal, basically credit. If you do this, or if this project costs X to renovate or to recover this area, so we will give you in terms of credit. So the municipal level, the municipal government, paid for use that as money for transaction.
If, for instance, it's the same program that was used here in Armenia, the landfill in Nubarashen is extracting the methane and flaring it, burning it. And then so you have carbon dioxide emissions, so you reduce the impact. And that was done using this clean development mechanism of the Kyoto Program. In our case, the Japanese invested, and the Japanese are taking the carbon credits and using them against their obligations.
So this was internal emitters in Brazil who
Yes.
bought the vouchers?
It was
I don't
internal.
know if it's internal, because
Yeah.
usually those who were emitters, they could be German, they could be.
They could
other
be.
countries.
That was a first experience, and it was very much local. Okay, and then we have a proper market, and now there's a lot of people buying and selling in the carbon market. But what is going on is that actually it's for large firms. Large firms, for example, Natura is one of the Natura. You know Natura? Have you heard of Natura? It's a cosmetics industry, very successful, that uses a lot of products from nature, right? They do a lot of research, and they use it, and they also have a social commitment. So they have a big, let's say, portfolio of carbon credit, right? And there are others, but all of them, Vale, Petrobras is a huge investor, but all of them are talking about huge amounts of carbon, right? They are not talking about 16 hectares or 16,000. Even if 16,000, that is the size of that area, the indigenous area, is not too small, but still it's small comparatively to the big farms in the northeast, northern part, or close to the Amazon. So the idea is well, how can we work that in a way that they take advantage and they appropriate of that mechanism. And with them, we try to develop, and then we looked at other examples. For example, there are many more, but these are, for example, Assurua is an area, where there's a wind power plant, and they have many carbon power projects. Some of them they work with families. They generate like a 1.1 million megawatts, right?
Hours,
Energy, clean energy, and they have had like 361,000 plus grants. This was the beginning of 2005, and they keep growing, right? They create a lot of jobs, and they do projects very close to the community. Of course, there are a lot of questions, right? Because, for example, when you have a wind farm or wind power plant, it's like people think that it's just beautiful, right? Those windmills going around, and it's like if they like your, but it's not. It's awful to live around those things. It's very noisy. It's all the time. It's very, very noisy. Some people live under it, right? But then they had to negotiate it. But with this negotiation, they start, the people who are around, the surrounded, and they start getting involved and knowing the rights and thinking, how can the community start getting, and they only could do it in a cooperative or in a collective way. So this, in terms of like of project, you think, well, how are they benefiting of it? But most, there is a lot of kind of secondary impacts or unexpected effects that are basically in terms of getting together, learning, managing the local projects, and even thinking like, well, what are we going to do if this actually is not what we thought, like it's not like the beautiful windmills running around with the wind, but actually it's a problem for the community because it supports the community, and actually it even has some risks, right? So the other project was actually, but this is much larger.
Sorry, if you could, I know we don't have a lot of time, but if you could go back to the previous one.
Yes.
Similar issues exist with, for instance, reforestation or afforestation in Armenia. No big financing will come to Armenia because it's too small of a market. So the issue of aggregating this to have big, so you have to combine Armenia, Georgia, Azerbaijan, Central Asia, then it becomes an attractive market. Because these investors cannot get involved in this very tiny transactions. It makes it impossible for them to do. So aggregating these projects into a package is a service that
is
worth exploring. You know.
I think there are two things. One is aggregating them, aggregating groups around one project. But the other thing is also advocating for private rights, that for smaller areas. The areas now for the carbon accreditation are too huge. So they can only do if they are in a group, in a large groups, if they do cooperatives. But if you start dealing it as a more regular market, and that's what we're advocating, say like, well, let's have this green fund, whatever. We were thinking of a green fund that works like a community bank. So we do it through the bank, and people can, even in small areas, of course they will have to work together.
The bank gets its money from the carbon markets.
Yes.
And then lends it.
The bank is actually the intermediary, right? But it's a local bank. It's a local community bank that is linked to the community. I think it's much less than the Grameen Bank because it's just local. It's not regulated by the central bank, but it has power to have as a juridic person, like a person that can negotiate with the larger market, right? So creating this, to create that, you have to create a kind of institution that talks about financial education, environmental education, agriculture, economic education, right? Because how do we turn all of this? You think of a tree can be an asset, and then, for example, these here, you was coordinated by a larger company. In these other groups, in these settlements, in the indigenous communities, sometimes you don't have who really brings it to them. So you have to, it's a process of learning together, assessing the things. Information. And for example, there is a really interesting example in this area actually. They were starving at some point because the federal government was not making transfers. And they had one railroad company was crossing their area. And the railroad, huh?
Block the railroad.
No, well, actually in another area of Suzano, there's a big paper company, they did, and there's a huge dispute over this, and they were actually laying down the tracks. But this one, they did something that was very clever. Of course, they were helped by the consultants, but they realized the company, it is I forgot the name of the company, but it's one of the biggest railroad companies in the world. So they logistic companies, and they were giving the money to an intermediary, and the money would never get to them. So they decided to go to the to buy option, one stock in the market. So they bought one stock,
Share in the company.
one share, and after they bought that one share, it was they wouldn't do anything. They would go to the meetings, to the assemblies, and screw up the meeting. Basically, they would talk and intervene and say, no, they could just one option, right? And they could actually make them, first of all, visible. And with that, they changed the whole system to the point that during the COVID time, they were actually feeding the population in the surrounding area. So now, for example, they don't, this particular group where the railway goes through, do not have to, they don't even need to worry about carbon markets, right? But the thing is they have to, the other aspects, well, it's not just my problem solved, I don't have to deal with any other problem. No, so then it's like very, they start looking at the tools or the institutions as like something that they can use. For example, I would never think of buying one stock option in one company and go to the meeting and just say, oh, I disagree, or I want to talk, just to have voice. And that this would change the whole system. So this is what I call appropriation of market mechanisms. It's like they are there for us, right? We can all appropriate, but we don't know. And when I say we, because many times, I didn't know either. I had to learn with them, well, what I can do, how can we use them? Carbon credit is not obvious, right? You have a process that is very long. It costs millions sometimes. Only very large farmers and can do it. Tribal people, indigenous people, when they are in the Amazon, they have very large areas. They are doing more and more. But it's like, but there the difficulties and the problems are others. Right, and they are very well assessed, assisted by groups that know how to do this. But these people, they are in the fringes. They are in the fringes of the system in general term, right? And it's not just the fringe of the system in terms of social and finance. The other project that we looked at is this in Pará. It's a very large project, and also we looked at logging. Logging is an activity in Brazil that is done very much by informal people, and but in every sector. There you have indigenous people doing that, you have farmers. So, and then there is a lot of, like, how do we deal with that? How do we actually give them more empowerment and more resources? And carbon credits, if actually they are logging and we don't want it. So it was another discussion that we had, and there are projects actually done with loggers, and that have been trying to see what is the compensation, what is the trade-off that we can do so that we don't get in these situations. So then once you did all of this diagnosis, we looked into it. This is the process, the methodological process. We listed with them what we could do, like from tourism, indigenous agriculture, and then we realized that actually to have a fund is the easiest, talking to them. And it was not the easiest, but the easiest in terms of implementation, because you create an NGO or an institution, and you then you have people working there, and the easiest, the largest impact. The other ones would be very small impact, for example, indigenous agriculture. It's very minimal, right? How much they can produce, and they are not very much used to large production. And so in that, the idea was that they will do the fund, and we start doing it 1.5 years ago, right? The idea is to have the social, environmental, and social, economics, environmental, and social tripod, and we've changed some of the governance, but a governance that is more in the hands of the people that are directly affected by it, be indigenous or not, right? That has cooperation and that has also creates institutional, new institutions. For example, the fund, the green fund or the green bank, then will deal with it. Here there are this more theoretical or the tools that were available, but I'm not going to go into it. So for this area, just to tell you, they stock, it's like 16,000 hectares. It's more or less in biomass. It's 130 million tons of carbon, and then you can. There's most of it is secondary forest, but there is a lot that is a little bit mature. So mature forest you treat in a different way, and that's why it's so complicated to calculate it. And then the total stored is 7.6 million tons as a total, yes. What else? So these are other experiences in Brazil, cooperatives and other programs. There are several municipal programs, and that's it. This is how we did, and then well, basically that's what I have. If the project is going on, it's not still a pilot, right? And well, we hope it works. For
Is there a deadline for the project?
No.
They're just gonna go
it's
on?
to work. These groups of indigenous people, they are not as well organized, right? And they have a very difficult type of governance. I mean, the way they change a lot. Who's the leader? They move. They have some features of being nomadic. Still, like not the territory is theirs, but the people move. So it becomes more difficult to do that. So and they don't have still they don't have the concept of the whole area, because it goes from the southern part of Brazil, even from Paraguay and Uruguay, to Espírito Santo and Bahia. Now it's less than it was originally, but and they don't have that. They don't work together in that sense, and they change priorities from now. You know, for example, as I said, when they start receiving money from the railway, they kind of
They were happy.
They were happy, yes. They were kind of, oh, you know, maybe you don't need. They were helping people in surrounding areas with their food, because they had much more than the people during the pandemics, right? So, and then they feel more like comfortable. And this has been with other projects as well. So it's a really slow project. Some of the communities up north, they are much more organized, and there are very strong NGOs behind them, so they do it easier. But the problem then is like how you measure it when you're in the middle of the Amazon forest, right? It's like it's so the diverse. You have to, and the process of doing the report is very, very, very specific. You have to, sometimes you have to count the number of species that are in the area, and then you have to, you monetize differently by species, and you have to know how each one of the species, or how much they contribute to the whole process. So it's impossible, it's for a firm. I have friends who have rural land property, and they say, well, you know, it's not worthwhile, because you pay a lot until you get there. But if it, for the people who have money, have knowledge, and can wait, it's hard. Guess what, for people who don't have that culture, right? Or who don't have resource to support it. So it's very difficult, but it is actually happening to in a small proportion. For example, there are some occupations. Occupations in São Paulo are areas that have been not used, or buildings that have been left empty or vacant for a while, and people occupy because there are a lot of homeless people in Brazil, particularly in urban areas. and in these areas they are doing gardens and projects for like reforestation of the area, the surrounding area, and even the landless movement. There is a huge movement today in Brazil, has projects, several projects. They have one of the largest production of organic produce. Huh? Sorry?
I thought acai specifically.
No, it's like they have the largest production of whole wheat and organic wheat in the southern part of Brazil, of rice, and they are very efficient, and they distribute not only in the settlements where the people are, taking over. What depends how you tell it. It looks like you are invader. You invent land and you have it, and then you can do whatever. It's not like that. It's very organized, and they are very effective in terms of discussing the production processes of distributing it, tapping into commercial channels, but they are a group that is very politicized, right, and is very connected to a political party. So it's very different from these people that I'm talking and work with. They don't want to be. Right? They don't want to be connected to political parties. I have invited them to come to some meets. They said, "Oh, we don't go because we don't like these meets," and they are very much looking to themselves, right? They have we have our culture. They don't for one, they don't marry outside the group. They talk a mix of Portuguese and the Guarani Mimbiá, and it is, as I said, it's 20-30 minutes away from downtown area. In terms of distance, not in terms of time, because traffic's awful, but it's still, it's how do we really involve not only the indigenous. Here I'm talking about indigenous, but there are a lot of other groups there, right? Producers, farmers, peasants that could be in this process together, in this project together, but they are still very dispersed.
Thank you. Yeah. Any questions, anyone?
Yes.
You mentioned some of the concerns and ongoing debates about limited additionality of a lot of the carbon markets projects. I mean, it depends on the background of this particular project, but it seems like indigenous lands that has, some measure of sovereignty and protection doesn't face deforestation threats to begin with would be a classic example where there's going to be minimal additionality, right? Like, this is really more about a wealth transfer than preventing future deforestation. Another line of that critique is that, when there's more of a dependence on financial flows, I would imagine there's, quite a different value system or other motivations or legal systems that protected the land to begin with. There might be a concern that, depending on financial flows in the future, might lead to much more volatility. In other words, when, carbon markets change, if the prices go down, that could increase deforestation pressure when indigenous communities are, when the instrumental value of the forest displaces other forms of values that may have protected it to this point. So I don't know, I'm curious how you think about those two.
I think it's very valid, and I think you are right. But I also think that there is a crescendo process, right? That you get involved and then you learn with this. So part of the project is education in general, but it's fiscal, financial education, environmental education, commercial education. So, and this problem that you said about like lands that are defined or rightly regulated are more protected is not true. Okay, this land is has all the legal support instruments or legal credits or certifications that they need, that it needs to be there. And still, actually, I think this land in the fringe and the outskirts of the city is more at risk than large areas in Brazil, because they are more visible. There they are not visible. It's like it's one more group that lives in the periphery, So it's very interesting, this question, because it does happen, these ups and downs. For example, the example that I gave of the waste, the dump, right? And then people lost interest. But actually the mobilization continued there. So they are not working anymore on the environmental or the question of the garbage or the dump, but they are working with other problems. And it's a very mobilized community in terms of engaged in doing things and growing. But it's I think to some extent it's unavoidable to think like, well, they might grow out of that phase and go into another phase. That's why you have to create a process, like even that will just not be beyond just nature. It's not that just nature, but it's like to link nature to every other aspects of life, right? Sustainability in terms of commercial sustainability, or think of that as an asset, and then education, a cultural asset as well. For example, the indigenous people, they have the forest as a cultural and historical asset. They do think that they are the forest protectors, and they told that to me. But they, even in this area that is reaching all the steps in the legal chain, they are in jeopardy, or they have like some threatened. And I have seen there more. Of course, in other areas, sometimes you don't even see because it's the middle of the jungle, right? But I have seen a lot of invasions, and I have a house very close to there. My parents lived there had a house there for 50 or 60 years, and I always go there. And it's changing drastically. And you see these things that, for example, now they are worried about this. And they told, like, I don't have money, maybe if you could have the resources to defend the borders, we could do better. But then they have some money and they don't do it, so it's a constant process that is, so I think it only kind of is consolidated if you have it, a rationale that follows your whole life, like why to do it, how to do it, it's better, for whom it's better. But the indigenous people have it for them, that they have this thing of with nature, interaction, integration with nature, right? So I think it might be, I don't know, because we didn't have any results yet, but it might be, and with indigenous urban groups is very new, that we never talk about them. For example, my students, they didn't know that we had indigenous land inside São Paulo. I started going to this area, besides my house, my father's house, my parents' house being there, because I used to teach urban planning and cities, global cities. I said, well, a global city like São Paulo is, and it's in the top 50 global cities in the world, it has a indigenous tribe or indigenous territory inside it, and people don't know. The educated students that I taught, they didn't know. So once you start knowing and involving people, you start expanding. So for example, the ecotourism hub is an option, right? It's very incipient, but it's growing. But I agree that it's a risk, but you have to take it. Otherwise, you don't do anything.
Monica, to what extent are you, or the community, the people leading these initiatives, are they engaging leaders from the indigenous communities or the communities that are involved in the change to try to communicate?
For example, this project we worked directly with the leaders, and also with classes with the indigenous, the other members of the community, but sometimes it's not very easy to deal with all the leadership, right? Sometimes they want to they want to have the all ownership of it, so it's harder. Some groups are easier to work with than others. For example, and some groups are very organized. This group was not very organized. Well, they are organized in their own way. So, for example, they have a rotation in terms of leadership. And the leader can be one, and it can be other, and they take turns. And they fight internally. Actually, my husband is working with some of these issues in another field, but he couldn't develop a project there because they were not organized enough. And they were debating and discussing and in disaccord so much, he had to look for another territory that was in the up north in the Amazon, right? But he tried with this group, and then we also had to check the culture of each tribe. You know, they have different ones, and then sometimes it's when they have very strong leadership, you see that they are very informed and educated, and they are very tough. In this case, they are not. They were most young, and they were girls. They were taking ahead of it, and they took to get involved. That took me almost 10 years, because this project is 2 years old, right? But I started going there and talking to them in 2010, when I first took my students there, and then it was like, and then they would, oh yes, and they would tell, oh no, but the foreigners pay more attention to us. I said, well, what can you do? Let's talk, and even that's very hard, you know. And it's hard. I am not an anthropologist. I don't know how to do maybe in a more efficient way with them. I go there. I'm a policymaker in public administration, finance, and my idea was like, how can I make viable for them to, for all of us actually. When I'm talking about having smaller plots that can be certified, I'm talking about myself, right? And too, in this area that I have there, and to make it more viable, to make them appreciated, yes, as an asset, and it's sometimes it's very hard.
So on that topic, today COP30 starts in Brazil. Do you think it's going to be conducive, or have you seen any movement in such projects coming together more? Yes, no, it is incredible to what has happened. And if you look what you had for 30 years, of course there are waves, right? Some ebbs and flows. Sometimes you advance something and then you go back, and then advance. But yeah, we cannot look at things, the advance that we have had and the experience that we have had. All of these experience, I brought 3 experiences here, like that I listed there, but I wasn't even able to tell more about that. But there are many more. In Brazil, there are 186 projects. Of course, it's a small number, okay? But considering Brazil, because there are millions of NGOs, millions of groups who work with them, millions of people interested in terms of money, and now the market is also discovering them, discovering as potential buyers and sellers, right? So this is very good. I don't think it's bad at all. I think that actually we have to be part of it, right? It's here to, it's never going to change. So we have to be part of the market. We have to be able to enable actors to use it, right? And I think what has happened, what has evolved is really important. We cannot throw away any of the experience, and there are so many experiences.
Are you publishing? You publish this stuff?
No, I'm not yet.
Because this is what markets need, right? They need information to flow. So
yeah, but there's a lot of publication, for example, Banco Palmas that I mentioned, there's a social bank, local bank, community bank, has more than 20 years, and it's highly publicized, the experience. The one that I mentioned in the down, it's not. But there are other experiences that are publicized. But it's a niche area, right? And sometimes niche areas are not appreciated or viewed as an example. So people that are working with environment sometimes do not mix people who are working housing. They do not work with people who are working like so it's silos. Now it's getting, that's why it's hard. It's a very complex environment.
Thank you, Monica. Just for a few words about the next lecture, we are going to have Dr. Pinhanez' next lecture on Wednesday. It's about participatory budgeting and local environmental governance. So if you are interested, it is going to be in this room at 5 p.m.
thank you very much.
Thank you.